Well, my prediction stunk. I mean, it was off by a full point.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time for a reaction episode of Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view post-Oregon dominating Illinois, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I'll talk about some of the biggest moments in this game and some things that I didn't like about this game. There weren't many. Some were in the game, some were outside of it, but we'll get those out of the way on the third segment of today's show. But make no mistake about it, Oregon fans should feel really good about this game. Really, really good. This was a complete and utter thrashing from the get-go. Oregon gets the ball first, touchdown. Oregon gets the ball again, touchdown. Illinois, field goal. Congratulations. Not going to win you the football game. Oregon goes and scores a touchdown. 35-3 at the half. I believe the yardage through two quarters was 363 to 89. It ends up by the end of the game being 527 to 293. It wasn't even that close. As impressive as 38-9 over the number 20 team in the country is, this was somehow even more impressive for the Ducks. That looked like the number one team in all of college football. First time in a dozen years Oregon's gotten that ranking. Yeah, I know. Who cares? Who cares? That's how Dan Lanning should approach it. That's clearly how his team approaches it, because they're just going out and playing Oregon football every week, and no one has been able, except for Ohio State, to keep up with them in Big Ten play. They just have not, and Oregon's next four games, all incredibly winnable. Not gimmies, not all of them per se. Going to Wisconsin can be tough. Saw Penn State do it. They won 28-13, but that game's a few weeks away. Michigan's up next. But I mean, this was just start to the end of the first half, shall we say. Oregon just overwhelmed them. And it's something that I talked about throughout the week, that if Oregon plays to their standard, Illinois can't keep up. Well, they did. You saw what that looked like, and everything was in the books. They were able to run the football. I said I'd like to see Oregon's offense against a capable Illinois defense get over 200 yards rushing. What do you know? 228? Is that the number? 229 rushing yards, just under 6 a carry. Everybody was able to run the football. Dylan Gabriel ran for a touchdown. Jordan James, of course, ran the ball well. Noah Whittington looked great. So the running game was there. The passing game was there. Everything was there. And that Oregon defense just continues to shine. And the only feather you take out of the defense's cap in this game was a penalty from Derek Harmon that Dan Lanning was giving him a talking to on the sideline about. Can't do that. If that penalty doesn't happen, and Derek Harmon knows better, but getting caught up in the game and Oregon's defense playing so well, if that penalty doesn't happen, I think this final score is 38-3. Because Illinois then punts, and look, maybe they put together another drive where they go down and score. I mean, they converted a bunch of third downs on that drive on their way to the end zone, but this is just another dominant day for the defense. And this is going to be an early second segment sip. It's been a long day, so the throat is mildly tired. Southern Utah got a nice win on the road against West Georgia, for those wondering. Many of you didn't, so we'll get back to the Oregon action here. But I just love watching this defense play. I really do. They win at every single level. Luke Altmaier ends the game under 50% completion, under 200 yards, no touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. So Will Howard of Ohio State is, to this day, here in 2024, the only quarterback to go over 200 passing yards in a game this season. And that is a function of Oregon's secondary playing well, which they absolutely did today. My individual shout-outs on Monday's show are going to feature plenty of secondary players. But the defensive line is so disruptive. 3 more sacks. They were causing havoc all game. Oregon looks like the number 1 team in college football right now. They've got that ranking. Not everybody plays that way when they assume that position. And I think it's fair going into a game to say, well, how are they going to respond with that? Can they tune out the outside noise? Yeah, they can. They clearly can. That's a really solid, respectable Illinois team. And Oregon made them look like they should have made Idaho look in the first week. I mean, it was... This Oregon team just continues to look better and better and better, and they're getting off to strong starts. They started strong against Purdue on the road. They started strong here against Illinois. They started strong against Ohio State. They've been getting off to fast starts. They're just blitzing teams. They're just able to overwhelm them, and we're seeing this formula play out week after week. And it's why Oregon's number one team in the country. And I still was thrown off seeing the one next to Oregon's name, like, oh yeah, Oregon's the number one team in college football right now. And I was thrown off again when I heard the SEC on CBS music being played for Oregon in a Big Ten game, and Brad Nessler and Gary Danielson, the top CBS crew on the call in Eugene. I talked with Brad Nessler about that at Big Ten Media Days earlier this summer. Well, here it was. There's the game. Nessler back calling an Oregon game. It felt strange, but then you looked at the product on the field and you realize it's all incredibly worth it. It's all incredibly justified and earned. Oregon at this point in the year has just been exceptionally good. Yep, the Idaho game, it stunk. You put Oregon and Idaho on the same field right now, think Idaho goes into Autzen Stadium and pushes the Ducks? Because I sure don't. Because the mark of a good team is you don't play down to the level of your competition, which they did in week one, but you also progress over the course of the season. All the great coaches, especially in the NFL, you see teams play their best football at the end of the year. Who are the two-time defending Super Bowl champs? Kansas City Chiefs. Andy Reid, great coach. Have they always been perfect in the regular season? No. But last 2 years, what have they done? They play their best football when it matters most. And yeah, for Oregon, it's going to matter most if and most likely when they find themselves in the college football playoff picture. But as this season's going along, it feels like Oregon is just unlocking the full potential of this roster week after week after week. Because you are seeing the running game work, you are seeing the passing game work, you are seeing the defense play well. Andrew Boyle hit a 44-yard field goal. I mean, if Oregon's going to hit 45 to 50-yard field goals at least a respectable rate, that's been a hindrance over the last couple of years. And if you introduce that component, well, suddenly I don't know what you're missing, because I love watching Dylan Gabriel just get more and more comfortable in this offensive system. I love seeing the ground game have success. I loved watching the defensive line again. Every time we look at a matchup on paper here on the show, and I talk about how Oregon's defensive line, or anyone else who comes on the show, that Oregon's defensive line should have an advantage here. They've had it. They have shown it. It's been clear and obvious every single series where you go, they're just not going to be able to run the football, or throwing's going to be tough because they don't have time to throw. And Jordan Birch didn't even play. He's been doing some light activity, is what Dan Lanning said after the game. He could be back next week. Not sure. Would love to have him against Michigan in a rushing attack that is incredibly potent. But the fact that you don't have arguably your best defensive lineman, you can make the argument for Birch, you can make the argument for Derek Harmon, do whatever you like. Being without a guy of Birch's caliber who was playing at an incredibly high level and still playing this way up front, defense just showed again, they are exactly as good as they looked on paper coming into the season. So love seeing all of that. Just a complete and total domination here of a top 25 team. And Illinois had earned that ranking, and Oregon's earned their ranking as well and solidified it again for another week. Let me know your thoughts in YouTube comments, or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter. There were several pivotal moments in this particular game. I have many thoughts on those moments. And guess what? They're coming up next. After I talk to you about ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol probiotic drink, which is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember, make ZBiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. As someone who's used it, I can tell you, This stuff works, so don't miss your chance to go check it out at zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On College at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, I don't think you will be, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege, use code LOCKEDONCollege at checkout for 15% off. And once you do that, go check out my guys over at Prize Picks, the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks, the best money to get real money sports action. They have over 10 million users for a reason. Everybody's loving it, and you will too. Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Just download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege after you download the app to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Go check out Prize Picks and run your game. Big T guy. We've been over this before. There was a spirited debate once upon a time in the comment section of this show. Tea or coffee? It got popping more than I thought it would. I'm a tea guy, personally. Not anti-coffee per se, but definitely more in the tea department as I drink it every single day. So, few plays in this game that stand out to me in particular. I'll start with the Derek Harmon penalty. And I want to start there because this is a guy who has played a lot of college football, who has been incredibly good, incredibly disruptive, and I don't think there's a larger indication or any bigger takeaway other than this was perhaps the most pivotal play towards this game looking closer than it needed to. 38-9, heck of a number. Heck of a number. But really wasn't even that close. And it was a foolish play, but I think you could easily look at this and the Trayshawn Holden incident, and Trayshawn Holden was back on the field, though he's getting pushed for playing time by Justice Lowe, who I'm going to talk about in a moment, and say, well, like, is there a problem? Is there anything? I don't see it that way. I think he just got a little overzealous, went a little bit too far. Not super worried about it, but it definitely stood out to me because Illinois ended this game with 293 yards of total offense, which is a great number for Tosh Lupoi's defense. And, Dan Lanning, Chris Hampton, of course, a part of that as well. Tony Tuioti, all the guys. But 293 yards is really good. What percentage of that came on that singular drive? 70 yards? 70 yards? Like, however good you think this performance was for Oregon's defense, I think it was a touch better. So that's the only reason that I wanted to start with that. But the second one, Justice Lowe. I mean, Oregon's just got dudes everywhere that you look. 9 different guys catch a pass. Let me make sure I got that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different players catch a pass in this game. Yeah, one of them was Jeremiah McLaughlin from Austin Novosad. I'm going to talk about that in a moment as well. 5 different players score a touchdown. Gabriel, and he threw the ball to Tez Johnson. He threw the ball to Justice Lowe. Noah Whittington got in on the action. You had Dylan Gabriel run for a touchdown. Like, Oregon has recruited incredibly well from the high school ranks in the portal over the last couple of years. And I think week over week, I'm thinking more and more about how those efforts are paying off in real time. Because you don't just see Oregon have a couple of players. Like when you watch a team, take Colorado, for instance. Colorado's a good football team. I know not everyone likes hearing that, but as I've been talking about on Locked On College Football since the offseason, they address their weaknesses. They're a good football team. They're incredibly reliant on 2 guys, Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter. And those guys, pretty good dudes to be reliant on because they are exceptionally dynamic NFL caliber playmakers. What I love about this Oregon team is, yeah, they've got several NFL guys on the roster on both sides of the ball, But I never feel watching this team defensively or offensively like they are solely reliant on one or two guys. I feel like the depth of playmakers that Oregon has put on display this year is reflective of the talent they have recruited in the last couple of cycles and players they brought in from the transfer portal. But you can get an impact play from anywhere. Take the 4th and goal in the third quarter. Illinois goes down the field. They go for it. Who makes that pass deflection? Amarion Winston, who was doing everything in this game. He's going to be an individual shout-out, I can already tell you, on Monday's show when I get to that segment. And that's because he made a significant impact on this game in that one particular moment, elsewhere too. But when you can have the number of impact plays that Oregon gets from just a variety of players, I think this is what the result is. This is what it ends up looking like. And I think that it's a great thing to see. It's why the defensive line can be as good as they have been without Jordan Birch. It's why Trayshawn Holden is, essentially, I don't think they officially announced it, but was clearly suspended for the Purdue game, and you don't have a drop-off in the passing game, even though it's your number 3 wide receiver. And you didn't have your number 1 tight end. Terrence Ferguson hasn't played the last couple of weeks. And Oregon's put up 35 and 38 points, and they slow down significantly in the second half. I'll talk about that in the third segment. But I just think that, an explosive play for a touchdown to Justice Lowe, the 4th and goal that really, I think, was a kind of flag-planting moment for this Oregon defense of, hey, we're here. I mean, there was nobody open on the play anyway. Altmaier was trying to fit it into a tight window. There was no one there. They ran the Chiefs concept from the Super Bowl, what Andy Reid, I think, calls corn dog. Motion the guy in, and then he zooms back out into the flat, and Oregon runs zone, so they're sitting there in the perfect coverage, and everybody else was locked up on the nearest player, and then Altmaier had some pressure in his face, had to let it go, incomplete pass, boom, 4th down stop. So situationally, Oregon was good in this game. Illinois 0 for 3 on 4th down. They were 5 of 13 on 3rd down in the football game. It's a good place to be. And I know that one drive where they scored a touchdown, they converted a bunch of 3rd downs. Yeah, it's going to happen. Altmaier made some plays with his legs. He can make some good throws. He's got a couple of good receivers, but I loved the way that this defense played situationally, and I just think the number of impact plays we see every week, it's just fluctuating around. It's this guy. It's that guy. I mean, Bryce Betcher had been quiet the last few weeks. Remember, he was the talk of the defense. He was the story on that side of the ball. Did you know he plays baseball? And he has been, I think, compared to the first few weeks, not much of an impact player. And all of a sudden, there he is making tackles, and he picks up his first sack of the season. Like that's what excites me about this Oregon team. Why I look at them and say, yeah, they can win the national championship this year, because I watch a lot of college football every week. There are a lot of really good teams out there. I don't think there's anyone who I'd say Oregon is incapable of beating. There are plenty of teams capable of going toe-to-toe with Oregon who can beat them as well, but who's Oregon not able to beat on the field? Neutral site, home, away, like whatever. I don't see that particular team. So I thought those moments really, really stood out to me as like, wow, this is going great. This is really good. And then at the end of the game, I made a similar comment on last year's show, so you never know. A lot of things can happen, but Austin Novosad gets in at the end of the game. And Gary Danielson, one of the best analysts out there on television, he makes the point that the redshirting process allows a guy to play in 4 games plus postseason. But Austin Novosad came in because against Michigan State, when backups came into the game, it was Dante Moore. And so now it was Novosad's turn, and they're clearly intentionally protecting the red shirts of both those guys. Saw Dink Riggs, by the way, freshman running back. Boy, that guy looked good. He looked phenomenal. Again, first time we'd seen him this year. We'd seen Jay Harris, but we hadn't seen Riggs yet. Boy, he looked really good. And Novosad threw a first down on 3rd and 4 to Jeremiah McLaughlin. Had one throw that was behind Trayshawn Holden. If he leads him, it's probably a first down, but he threw it to Jeremiah McLaughlin. I just saw that and thought, Riggs in the backfield, Novosad at quarterback, McLaughlin at receiver. I don't know. Just file that one away in the old memory banks. If you think I missed a standout play that you want me to talk about on the show on Monday, let me know. Drop your thoughts in the YouTube comments. Hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter, or become a Locked On Ducks insider. You can get a free 14-day trial with the link in the description below. Then it's just $5 a month. You get priority mailbag access and all sorts of other perks too. So there were a lot of good things in this game, as I've discussed. It was not all great. There was one moment in particular that didn't like it. That's coming up next. First, this episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. I was Illinois. You had to go for two. I almost had the perfect prediction. My guy Max Torres obviously stole the score prediction for me. He didn't actually do that. He's my guy, but I can give him crap because he's a cool dude. I had 38-10, and it's 38-9. 38-9. I liked Oregon to cover, and I liked the under 54.5. Boy, that under wasn't looking so good at the half, and then Oregon did what Oregon always does in the second half, which I have a lot of thoughts on, and I'm going to share. But if you wanted to bet this game, and if you bet Oregon to cover, you're doing very well. If you bet them to not cover, you're not doing as well. But the good news, there are a lot more games. College football, NFL, anything you want. Check out America's #1 sportsbook over at FanDuel.com. Remember that time Oregon joined the Big Ten? And one of the most popular sentiments, at least amongst Oregon fans I interact with, was, we don't have to deal with Pac-12 officiating anymore. Well, you can take the team out of the Pac-12, but you can't take the Pac-12 out of the team. How are we blowing that play dead, guys? What are we doing? And this is where I will reiterate, I would love for the officials to have a post-game press conference so that this question can be asked and answered so that we can understand what is the process, why didn't you make this call, or why did you make this incorrect call, and how are you going to fix it going forward? Because all the stuff you hear about, there's an internal process and there's a review. I'm sure there is. Guess what? It sucks. It sucks. This stuff is so ridiculous. It's so annoying. Oregon, for the second time this year, has a turnover taken away from them. Didn't matter in this game. You could have given Illinois 2 turnovers they didn't deserve. Oregon still would have won. But it almost cost Oregon the Ohio State game. And it's fair to worry if it's going to cost Oregon a game at some point with this crap. It's really, really irritating. Also, boy, it looked like there were a lot of holds out there. I don't have a specific play in mind, but you saw them too, right? Like, it's not just me. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. Let me know in the comment section. But I was watching that game going, that looked like a hold. No? Nothing? Then at the end of the game, Oregon's running out the clock, and an offensive lineman is separated from his helmet. I'm sure the wind just picked up and blew it off or something. And then the helmet is launched downfield, and no flag. No flags in sight. No flags in sight. I've said for a long time, and I keep getting more and more questions about officials and officiating, and everyone is recognizing nationally that it's a problem in college football because it's really bad. I'm surprised when they get it right at this point because they get it wrong so often on such giant things, like that they blew the whistle so quickly there. Holy crap, what are we doing? So yeah, that was frustrating. I didn't like that about the game. Here's something I didn't like that the coaching staff did in this game. Oregon's up 35-9 early in the fourth quarter. Got to bottle up the anger here and let it out in a methodical, slow bleed sort of way here on the show. Why on earth are you throwing the ball down the field? What are you doing? Oregon runs the ball twice. Again, leading 35-9 in the fourth quarter. You just ran the ball twice and picked up a first down. What are you doing throwing it down the field? And that leads to Dylan Gabriel's interception. I wasn't worried at that point that Oregon was going to lose the game. I didn't care whether Oregon covered the point spread. What I cared about was the mind-boggling philosophy, number one, and number two, that you are putting players who Oregon needs to win the national championship, like, I don't know, Dylan Gabriel, in harm's way. You're going for a deep shot on first. Why? You don't need a kill shot. Your defense is playing lights out. Illinois is not scoring 26 points in a quarter. They're not even going to score 10 points in the quarter. So what we've seen from Oregon this year is they're running the score up in the first half and taking their foot off the gas in the second. I have no problem with that. Oregon is winning games convincingly. They're the number one team in the country. They don't need to garner respect that they don't yet have. They beat Ohio State. They're beating the crap out of everybody they play right now. They're not going to be moved off of that number one spot. And by the way, that isn't even a consideration from Dan Lanning and Will Stein and company per Lanning's own words, nor should it be. So again, I go back to, you just ran the ball twice. Like, yes, you're trying to pick up first downs, but if you use the clock correctly, even if you go 3 and out, you can take over 2 minutes off of the clock if you use the play clock correctly. If you go 3 and out, if you pick up 2 first downs, you can suddenly use 6 minutes, or depending on how quickly you get the first down, you can just take the time off the clock, take the air out of the ball. Don't give Illinois an opportunity. You know what gave them just a small sliver of an opportunity? Throwing the ball down the field, and it's an interception. It's completely unnecessary. And then you have Dylan Gabriel standing there in the pocket, waiting to get hit because it's a long developing play down the field, and quarterbacks are given special protections in that area. You know why? Because they're in a vulnerable position. So you put your starting quarterback in a vulnerable, I don't know why he was in the game in the first place. I think if, you're doing what you're supposed to do in the fourth quarter, which is just hand the ball off and run out the clock, I think Austin Novosad can manage that. And he can even throw the ball every now and then. What do you know? So I don't know why he's in there in the first place. If he is in there, he should only be handing the football off. But why are you taking this? That was the most infuriating moment of the game. As Gabriel dropped back to pass, out loud, I said, what are we doing? What are you doing? Then he throws the interception, and I was just losing. I was just like, why? What did you have to gain versus what you had to lose? Very poor risk calculation in my assessment there from the coaching staff. Did not understand that in the slightest, especially considering when you handed the ball off twice and picked up 10 yards. Just run out the clock. I don't care about the style points in the second half. Everyone saw that first half score and realized, oh, yeah, Oregon's really good. Yeah, if they take their foot off the gas in the second half, Illinois outscored Oregon in the second half 6-3. Is that how anyone's going to remember the game? Tom Fornelli had a funny tweet. He said, Illinois outscored Oregon 6-3 in the second half. They didn't lose. They just ran out of time. Solid tweet. Very solid. But Oregon is showcasing everything that they're capable of in the first half. Why on earth do you need to... it didn't make any sense. I have no issue with how the second halves of UCLA and Michigan State and now Purdue have gone. You know why? Because the question you would then ask is, well, can Oregon play a 4-quarter game? Yep, saw them do it. They had to play a 4-quarter game against Idaho. Shouldn't have, but they did. Got it done. Boise State, 4-quarter game. That's top 15 team. Broncos won again, by the way, on the road against a good UNLV team. So they've done it there. Ohio State, top 5 team in the country. What do you know? Oregon played a 4-quarter game. So if you're stressed about the third quarter lull and can Oregon do that, well, they're losing the juice. Why? Because they're just beating the crap out of the other team. And I don't care what sort of messages you preach. You're going to let up when you have that big of a lead. You're going to lose your edge a little bit. And I'm not bothered by it because I know that Oregon can put together a complete game when they need to. They just haven't needed to. But that moment in particular, completely infuriating. Final thing that was not great from this game. This isn't so much a negative as just like an eye roll. How in the world This is the first time this year I've gone surrender Cobra here on the pod. How are we still talking about Bo Nix and Tez Johnson? How? Look, I get literally how. This is the first time Brad Nessler has called an Oregon game this year. It's the first time CBS has covered an Oregon game this year on TV. But, I mean, we're just never going to shake that. I mean, I swear at this rate, Tez will be 3 years removed from Oregon football, and they're going to bring up this connection. Like, Bo isn't even on the team. I love Bo with all my heart. He's winning in the NFL. It makes me so incredibly happy. Just guys. You don't think people have heard this story before? It's been told. There are other stories to tell. I pray when Oregon plays Michigan next week, they're talking about a sign in the stands that someone put up that Lanning retweeted from someone who was a PE student of Dan Lanning's from way, way back when, and is now a student at Oregon, and Lanning it's awesome. Do that story. Mention that Bryce Betcher plays baseball, whatever. That's something only Oregon fans have heard too much of. But I do not believe that Oregon fans are the only ones to learn that Bo Nix and Tez Johnson are brothers. I mean, just like, guys, there are other stories to tell on this team. Figure it out. Figure it out. We've heard it over and over. It's just, they got to be trolling us at this point, right? Like, this has to be a practical joke from producers and announcers and reporters. These people are at the highest level of their profession. They're incredibly good at their jobs. They might just be trolling us. I can't rule out that possibility. The same way I couldn't rule out the possibility that Dan Lanning put 12 guys on the field on purpose. I mean, holy crap. Wild to spend the final 4 minutes of this show talking about it. But I mean, every Oregon fan I know that watches the game and hears that goes, oh my gosh, we know. We've heard the story. Like when Brad Nessler said in the first half, yeah, he's related to Bo Nix. People might not know. We've got more on that later. I'm like, no, you can't have more on it later. How do you have what more is there? And then they told us the same things, but it's because there are different companies that are broadcasting these games. So Brad Nessler hasn't told that story before. So he, probably hasn't tuned into every Oregon game and known that story has been told no less than 800 times. It's the funniest thing. It is honestly way too funny to be true, but it is starting to get to the point of like, can we knock it off and just find other stories? Please and thank you. I got a story. Oregon's the number one team in the country, and they looked like it again. Good time to be a Duck fan. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, go Ducks.